Good afternoon. We're still here on the third day of the Barcelona New Economy Week with the aim of reactivating the economy here in our country and also in the world. Since Tuesday, we have been offering different interviews, conferences, panels in 10 different stages, which are connected to each other. We have been talking about logistics, real estate, economic zones, digital industry, sustainability, mobility, talent, science, and city and e-commerce. We, as you know, are focused on this last one, on e-commerce. Now we are going to give way to an interesting conference about the revolution of new payments, and we will try to guess which is the path of the future. Just for your information, the pandemic has accelerating the digital transformation and also the payment methods. A clear example is Bizum. At the end of the last year, in 2020, it had almost 14 million users. To give you an idea, about 20,000 new users were registered per day. This conference will be moderated by Anne Laur mentioned. We will see her on the online platform. She is the director of the Global Business Innovation Enabling Capability Platform in the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology University in Australia. Thank you for being here with us. She will be talking with Vladimiro, Jesus, Francisco. So go ahead and we'll see you in a bit. Enjoy.
Many thanks for the very kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you so much for inviting me. Before introducing our fantastic lineup of speakers, I'd like to share some opening remarks. And if in the background you can work out the echo, that would be wonderful. Theoretically speaking, money is a social convention. People accept money in the expectation that everyone else will do the same. According to this definition, anything could serve as money if everyone, as it were, buys in. In economic terms, this equilibrium analysis gives rise to a theoretical notion of a currency area consisting of users in a community. In the same view, a payment system is no more than an organized arrangement for transferring value between its community participants. So defined, payment systems are fundamental to the functioning of all monetary economies. In the 55 years leading to the current COVID-19 pandemic, global trade more than tripled relative to world GDP, and the ratio of total exports to global GDP now stands at about 30%. Today, global financial linkages are shaping our economy. A new era of payment systems, as our regional and national economies progressively integrate financial systems and open up to developments beyond countries' borders. Three key developments have propelled money and the payment system to the top of the policy agenda in the last few years, and seizing the attention of observers and commentators alike. The first was the rise and subsequent fall of Bitcoin and its cryptocurrency cousins. The second was the entry of big tech firms into financial services, and the third being the rise of open and collaborative innovation practices. Each of these developments, in its own way, have raised questions about the basic architecture of money and payment systems. So far, the existing structures have weathered the intellectual onslaught, yet the resulting debate over the future of money and the payment system has just only begun. A gleaming skyscraper is an awesome sight. But when we admire one, we often overlook its foundations. They are out of sight, below ground level. But just because they are not visible, it does not mean that they don't matter. On the contrary, they matter a lot. I tend to think of the monetary and financial systems in the same way. The monetary and financial architecture needs solid foundations, just as a skyscraper does. Now the central bank would argue that this foundational stability can only be provided by a centralized financial system. But if we were to believe that monetary payment systems are built on trust, then should this trust be aligned to decisions and actions of one central entity? In an increasingly open and collaborative business environment, the notion of central bank public goods is perhaps difficult to perceive and realize. This is not to say that the role of central banks is obsolete. Rather, my role, as I see it today, is to advance the notion of payment ecosystems and the need for open innovation in revolutionizing the basic architecture of what we all know as account-based money. Increasingly, this means that the payment systems need to support the digital economy. With the digital economy being a key component to future economic prosperity, we need a payment system that is fit for purpose. And if we reflect on the recent challenge, the public health crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact on all aspects of daily life for people around the globe and has put the world economy on an uncertain footing. For the payments industry, the pandemic and its consequences have accelerated a series of existing trends in both consumer and business behaviors, introduced new developments such as restructuring of both supply chains and cross-border trade. According to McKinsey 2021 Global Payment Report, ongoing shifts towards e-commerce, digital payments, including contactless, instant payments, and cash displacements, have all been significantly boosted in the past 6 months. And while a degree of aversion to past behavior is likely for some of those shifts, the overall trajectory of these trends has received a strong push forward. In the following remarks, I'd like to focus on 4 areas of payments, and particularly the progress to date and the challenges for the new payment systems. First of all, we've been experiencing a decade of change in a few months. For global payments, the 15 months leading to June 2021 stands in dramatic contrast to the years before, which were relatively stable. For instance, global revenues grew by nearly 5% in 2019, bringing total global payments revenue to just under 2 trillion. However, an instability was quickly disrupted in early 2020 by changing geopolitics, but also the reactions to the COVID-19 pandemic, both in terms of political response and causal shifts in consumer behavior. According to the McKinsey 2021 report, payment revenues in the first 6 months of 2020 contracted by 20% relative to the first 6 months of 2019. Once COVID-19 moved from a local outbreak to a global pandemic, many governments moved to protect their citizens, leading to lockdowns with various degrees of restrictions. Discretionary spending initially sank by about 40% globally. While some categories of spending rebounded, consumers' well-documented shift to the point of sale to digital commerce accounts for reduced cash. According to global commentary, overall, in retail, the impact was not a decline, but a shift in buying behavior. In the first 6 months of the year, consumers spent about $350 billion online with US retailers, up 30% from the same period in 2019, and corresponding to 6 times the annualized 2019 growth rate of online retail. In Europe, the Swiss National Bank reported that differences in shopping behavior between geographies were strongly reduced, and differences between age groups eroded as many consumers, and particularly older shoppers, turned to online shopping for the first time. Another area of the payment systems where there's been significant change is the uptake of tap-and-go payments. There's also been rapid uptake of mobile payments, including through the use of wearable devices. From first-hand experience, all forms of electronic peer-to-peer and consumer-to-business payments have been boosted. In many regions, this has mostly benefited debit cards, which typically align with lower value transactions and are a logical cash substitute for contact-averse customers. The fears of contracting COVID-19 through high-traffic ATMs and in some cases the refusal of merchants to accept cash, often despite legal obligations, nudge consumers towards electronic payment options to complete purchases. That has resulted in a fall of ATM usage by 47% in April 2020 in India. In a nutshell, the pandemic has accelerated the move from physical to virtual banking. Banks in multiple regions are closing branches, as well as ATM, for good. These accelerated behavior changes in response to the pandemic caused a fundamental shift in adoption of technologies, as well as real-time account-to-account payment infrastructures that had been developed in the recent years. Investment in instant payments have begun to reap greater benefits, both in point of sale and e-commerce usage of instant solutions. The trend comes into consumer expectations for speed, price differences, and greater adoption of consumer-facing applications, such as GrabPay in Singapore or Mobile Pay in Denmark. However, and that's the first challenge, the rate of fraud is still too high in electronic payments, particularly in card-not-present transactions. Globally, there is some work being done around that. In Australia, for instance, the AusPayNet has developed a new framework to tackle fraud, which requires additional authentication requirements for certain types of transactions, including the use of multi-factor authentication. However, this is where the blockchain technology can really be useful. And I'm sure we'll hear more on blockchain's role in this new payment era from my fellow panelists. Second, and looking forward, we need new ways of engaging. What I'd like to conclude is that more work is needed. In particular, I'd like to draw your attention to 4 areas where progress is essential for the future of new payments. The first of these is further industry work to realize the full potential of these new payment platforms, including their data-rich capabilities. To move forward, open data, or, in the very least, a collaborative global infrastructure backed by blockchain would be helpful. It can also support significant improvement in business processes as data moves with the payments. Real-time settlements and posting of funds can also enable some types of delivery versus payment, so that the seller can confirm receipts of funds and be confident in delivering the goods and services to the buyer. That relates to my comment on trust. The second area for progress is the provision of portable identity services that allow participants to securely prove who they are in the digital environment. Today, our digital identity system is still fragmented and siloed, which has resulted in a proliferation of identity credentials and passwords. We all know that. This gives rise to security vulnerabilities and creates significant inconvenience and inefficiencies, which can undermine the development of the digital economy. These generate compliance risk and other costs for financial institutions, so it is strongly in their interest to make progress here. Interoperability of digital identity services is the key challenge. A strong digital identity system would open up new areas of digital commerce and help reduce online payments fraud. It will also help build the trust that we so much need, as people spend more time, but also more money online. The third area for the future of new payments is payments partners to focus on B2B and B2B2C business models and drive innovation in services. Most published indicators suggest that growth is in the SME segment, particularly in B2B and B2B2C business models, as online retail trade remains stable even after pandemic recovery. The shift to digital makes it possible for providers to create far more tailored solutions, and customers have shown a willingness to pay for these services as long as sellers demonstrate value. There is likely to be a sustained shift and a behavioral change in how consumers view payments. For consumers, the payment step is moving into the background of the shopping journey, and they expect support when conducting commerce and avoiding negative consequences, not merely as a means to pay. Transaction banking is a thing of the past. Lastly, my fourth and final perspective for the future of new payments is that we need to shift our thinking as innovators from time value of money to money value of time. Becoming digital by default requires significantly redefining the institution's operations through the lens of consumers' journeys. The events and trends of 2020 have undeniably created a changed global context for payments. But this change is not about payments itself, but rather how we imagine them and at what speed we can innovate. This puts all the actors of the payments landscape under pressure to transform and adapt in an increasingly open and digital era, where trust is of the utmost importance. I now would like to open up this panel and welcome our fantastic lineup of speakers. I'd like to invite each of them at a time to briefly introduce themselves and share some initial provocations on what they think about the future of payment systems. Paco, over to you.
Thank you, Annie, for your intervention. A brilliant intervention about what the future has a clear scope about what is going to happen, or maybe is going to happen. Because as you pointed out, we have a lot of kind of innovations for the future. Well, I'm the principal investigator in blockchain in a technological center in the south of Spain, in Granada, and we are exploring new ways in order to how to give the power again to the consumers. Or maybe we must to talk just with the beginning of the new kind of payments in the prosumers, because now actually all the payment systems is centered in the point of view of the companies, not in the point of view of the consumer, because in the last 30 years we have trained in order to give our data to the companies in order to establish a new kind of digital marketing in order to sell everything that we expect to buy in the future with this kind of prospective digitalization. But the idea behind the new area of payments must be an innovation focused in the data-centric consumer point of view. Why? Because we have the possibility to give back to the consumers how and when and with which companies and with organizations they want to share the data. So that means that maybe I'm talking that we are just in the beginning of this kind of innovations in this payment area. What could be the real position of consumers, not only of members of a society with only the point of view of in order to gain product services, but also we are citizens. So data must be improved in order to be used as with a much clearer vision from the part of the consumers that they are going to share some kind of information that can allow a new kind of markets. That means that maybe in the next couple of years, in 3 years, with the decentralization of the applications through the DLTs, the distributed ledger technologies, so known as blockchains, we have the opportunity to create a new kind of market. And in this kind of market will create a new kind of niches in every segment of any kind of market. So how we are going to build this kind of new markets is very important. The governance of this data and how we are going to link the paths between the companies, between the fintech solutions, between banks. You talk about the central banks. Central banks in a decentralized economy. I don't know how they are going to fit exactly. But we must to wait about what's going to happen with the renminbi, digital renminbi in China next year, or some experiments that we have in Europe, like in Sweden with the e-kroner, or maybe in the next future, in a couple of years, with the digital euro. But in the meanwhile, we need to reshape all these kind of relationships between consumers and business. And also, we need to start to think in new kind of regulations and new legal marks in order to allow that this kind of decentralized markets will emerge in the following years. Because the problem that we have now is we are working in an, okay, between brackets, in a legal system, because we don't have all the kind of information about how the technology is going to be improved and how the technology is going to be arranged in the next future. And this is another question relating to this kind of data. Because, okay, with blockchain, we can use the traceability and the strength of the identification within this kind of platforms. But which kind of platforms we are going to build up? Because we are talking about that this kind of platforms are going to be structured as a DAO, as a decentralized autonomous organization, or we are talking about the same kind of platforms as Amazon, you know, and Alibaba, and all these kind of platforms. There are several questions. I don't have. I have a lot of opinions, but I don't have a clear position about how we are going to work in the future. But I think that blockchain is an opportunity to give back the data to the consumers, to reshape the relationship between consumers and business and companies. So this is my entry point. Okay.
Thank you. And building on that and on data as the new oil and the new currency, I'd like to hear Vladimir's views, and if you could also briefly introduce yourself on how this data can actually be handled and how the relationship between businesses and consumers can be reshaped through the lens of data.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your introduction and your exposition of how you see the future. We are a company that has developed a blockchain platform based on blockchain technology to tokenize payment agreements between companies. It is mainly for the B2B area, and what we do is we provide a tokenized version of a payment agreement where all the participants in that payment agreement are part of it. So we can provide for banks and corporates and companies a tool to really transform in a digital process any kind of payment agreement, and thus providing more trustability, reducing the risk and fraud, which is typical in, let's say, legacy payment models, and of course improving the liquidity and financing of those instruments. So, and in our case, what we do is we use a technology, blockchain, which was at the beginning meant to work in a deregulated model. So because blockchain, when it was created with Bitcoin, it was thought to create a model where you do not need any central bank or any regulator in order to manage the economic transactions between parties, and it has demonstrated that it works. So if you use that concept of decentralizing the process in a regulated model, or let's say under regulation, you are providing a more trustable process where you can reduce the frictions of processes where you have to share the information, sending it from one system to another system, and then making validations and check-ins and that stuff, which is always producing delays, risks of errors and frauds, and at the end, costs for all the participants in the process. So I think with this approach that in the future we are going to see more and more how that kind of deregulated models are going to be implemented in, let's say, in the legacy world of banks and central banks, commercial banks, and other institutions. And in fact, for example, all that development of central bank digital currencies is part of this reaction, let's say, to the appearance of Bitcoin and blockchain. And if we remember what happened when Facebook announced, when Facebook, Visa, MasterCard, and others announced the launching of Libra, now DIM, it was let's say a big reaction from the central banks, because they saw that something that was a crypto fun experiment could become reality through tech companies that had more than 2 billion customers, which could be using money that was not under the, let's say, under the control of the system itself. So, and then they made a lot of pressure on Visa and MasterCard so they left the project, because it was going to be for them a little complicated to keep both sides to regulate. And also Facebook has, let's say, redefined the project as well, but it has speed up the process of thinking about a digital currency, because somebody's going to have it. And you can see what happened in Salvador. They have decided to consider Bitcoin their own national currency, or at least they can use it as a national currency. So that kind of things are going to happen even faster in the next years.
And we'll come back to that from the sort of global perspective. But before we move on to that, I'd like to ask Jesus about his thoughts on power play and power structures. They're obviously central to the future of payment systems. So how do you see that happening? And again, how data can actually help to maybe balance those power plays and structures?
Well, hello. Let me say first of all, thank you to Barcelona New Economic Week for the invitation, and congratulations for the organization. It's an amazing place to be, and I'm very glad to be here. I would like to speak about just a bit before something that you have been speaking in the introduction, and what Vladimir and Paco said. One of the things that we have to have in mind and to be clear is that when we speak about blockchain and DLT, we are speaking about sharing information and data. Okay, and the way we have to build the new markets that Paco said in his intervention, or how we have to reshape the economy in any way, is only with that will for everybody in a sector or a lot of companies together in order to go in the same way. I mean, the way the economy is built is fighting one with another, and the way where we have to build things in blockchain or DLT is working together. And in fact, a lot of things are much better working together in the same sector better than fighting with another companies or other enterprises from our own sector. That is the spirit of blockchain, the spirit of Bitcoin, the spirit of the cypherpunks or whatever. But that spirit has to remain when we think about any kind of project. I know very well the project of Vladimir and a lot of different projects. The idea always has to be to go in that way, in the way where the enterprises have to work together to try to find incentives for all of them and not for only one of them. So that this is a change on the way we have to think about when we build those kind of projects. Okay, so speaking about data relationship between customers that you have in the beginning. Well, I think that the only way to think about this kind of relation for the consumers is only with these thoughts in mind. We have to work together, push together in the same way, and any project that is built on DLT or blockchain, if it is not thought in this way, well, probably it's going to be a waste of time in the near future. For 2 or 3 years, perhaps it can work, but we have to take a lot of things when we speak about blockchain, and this is the magic of blockchain, and the payments for sure, is that you have to have in mind digital identity, decentralized organizations, incentives, tokenization, and this kind of transaction that every company have to do with each other. And if we want to build real projects based on blockchain, and speaking about what Gartner says this year, and we are looking for our blockchains that are like Bitcoin. I mean, that they work, they are alive. They don't need any kind of human intervention. And this can be done only with DAOs, with a lot of smart contracts there for sure, and with this kind of tokenization and incentives that have to be found in order to create those big projects. I think that I was speaking a lot about a lot of things. I'm so sorry if I didn't answer you now.
That's a very good start. And I would like to pick up on what you said about working together. I'm myself a scholar of open innovation, open and collaborative innovation. So working together is exactly what I'm advocating on a daily basis. But working together comes with a lot of challenges. And here around the table, when we talk about new payment systems, when we talk about the digital transformation more broadly, we have a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different backgrounds and perceptions, but also resistance to change. So how can we tackle that? And how can we give confidence, and how can we build a trust in that people are desperately looking for to be able to join that journey? Paco, I see you nodding, so maybe you want to take up that question first.
Yes, this is one of the main topics that we need to take account when you are talking about this new kind of era of new payments, because the main issue is the cybersecurity systems. Now we have a digital version of the analogic version of the economics of the last centuries, but in this digital version we have a lot of challenges, and these challenges always mean security, always means risks, a lot of risks, not only in the idea of how we are going to link the payment systems amongst the banks and the stakeholders that intervene in all the chain economy supply system, but thinking about how we are going to protect the consumers, because they are the weak item in this kind of the biggest chain that we have in the economy is how all these kind of operators operate between them. But I want to say that cybersecurity must be the first step in order to build up a new kind of payment systems. Because of this, blockchain is an opportunity, because it's more resilient than the main solutions that we have in the banking industries. So because of this also, there are a lot of banks looking into the future through the blockchains. In the case of Spain, all the major banks, Santander, Banco de Vizcaya, and also CaixaBank, and so on, are working on different kind of solutions in order to be more strong, in order to avoid any kind of interference between among the stakeholders that intervene in a payment solution. So in the side of the consumer, we need to prove new kind of tools that not only have the power in order to have retain the data, but how to operate this data with this kind of stakeholders. But that means that, okay, blockchain could be a solution, but not all of the blockchains are a solution. Because, for instance, we can look at what is happening now in El Salvador with the introduction of Bitcoin as a new system of payment. Bitcoin is not a real currency for the real life, because you can buy something and you can lose everything, or you can gain everything in a couple of days. This is a solution for the future? No. Bitcoin is another kind of cryptocurrency in order to understand how the world works in the financial institutions. But then at the individual level, we need to prepare ourselves and to prepare the society in order to have more concrete tools with a kind of cybersecurity to prove the resilience not only of your conditions in order about how you are going to operate with the companies or with the banks, but also we need to remark that the idea behind the blockchain is not only the cooperation that Jesus says and the idea to build up new kind of organizations. It's the idea to secure all data in the beginning, not waiting for the regulation or for a legal mark or for the good of commons, no, for of the society. No. It's for me the main step is how to secure the security of data. So the cybersecurity reason is one of the main approach that we have to take account when we are going to use new kind of improvements in the innovation. This can call it the era of innovation payments. No, so for me, it's one of the main the questions that we must discuss.
And following up on that, a question to all of you: what is the most innovative solution that you've seen in terms of protection of data, but also consumer protection? Because that's core and central to the adoption of new technologies. It could be within a company, it could be within an SME, it could be in a particular ecosystem. Happy for any example that you've spotted and that you feel is actually a good illustration of what a best practice could be.
Oh, it's a good question. It's a very good question. I'm trying to think about a real solution in the market. I don't find in my mind. Actually, I don't find nothing, because the blockchain promise is that the traceability and the identification of the users, of the stakeholders in the chain is strong. So the main real market solution now is in question about traceability of the product of the services. Now, the idea behind a global solution for the global markets based in blockchain, well, I think that Jesus
excuse me, and can you repeat the question, please?
Okay.
Well, it didn't have to be about global markets. It could have been about a very specific solution. So we've discussed about the importance of securing data and protecting consumers. So I was wondering whether you had spotted in any specific example, in any context, whether it's in one country or at a more individual company level.
Okay, if we are speaking about the protection of customers, and we are speaking about a global product, and we are speaking about protection of data, let me say that we are speaking about Ethereum or Bitcoin. That is the best project, and for sure. And what this means? This means that any kind of project that has to be that is built on private or consortiums or whatever are less private, are not the best for customers and consumers. And so the way we have to think about how blockchain project have to go to a real public blockchain. For sure you can build on private blockchain, but you have to end in any kind of way in public blockchain, any kind of public blockchain. I mean, in the way it is decentralized and have tokenization and is well encrypted and things like that, for sure we are speaking about any kind of project based on a public blockchain. For example, in 2019, Banco Santander made some kind of test sending some bonds, I think, in the public Ethereum blockchain. So that is the way we have to go, and that will be the future. You can want it or don't want to see it, but that is the way we have to do. And what I said in the beginning, if we are speaking about what we a DLT or a blockchain needs is a DAO with digital ID and things like that, that is the best thing to do those kind of things is only in public blockchain. And when we speak about public blockchain, for sure, we are speaking about only Ethereum for them right now. So to protect consumers, to protect companies and things like that, we are speaking about any kind of public blockchain, basically.
Well, I'm going to bring a different point of view. So not, you were asking about a solution or something that, but maybe it's not a solution, but a tool. So when we have the money, at least in Europe, US, Canada, Australia, we really trust on banks because they are regulated, and we know that our money, and when we use the banks to pay, they are more secure because we know they are not going to fail. And even if they are going to fail, there's somebody that has the rules in order to keep our money, at least to a certain amount, safe. If you are if your money is with a different company or in a crypto company, let's say, well, maybe they are providing you a fancy service or much better service, but you know that there's certain risk that this company can suffer a problem and you're going to lose it. If you're in a different countries where you cannot trust your, let's say, your regulated economy, maybe it's the best solution to be out of this. But let's say in our part of the world, we still trust the regulated environment because they provide you the stability and confidence for that. But for example, the sandboxes, the regulatory sandboxes that have been launched, UK was one of the first, Singapore was also, and they provided an environment where you can, at the same time, work with innovative companies, which provide you new models for payments and other financing services, but at the same time, having certain security that you are going to have your money and your processes, let's say, in a secure environment. And reality is that many companies have moved to UK, or many fintechs and startups have moved to UK because that's the place where they can test new services and provide new services to the customers, but having let's say a framework of regulation that helps to provide confidence.
And what's the state of play in Spain on regulatory sandboxes? Because they certainly represent a wonderful, safe environment for companies to try, test, and pilot, but also learn and make their offerings a little bit more resilient and easier to be taken up by consumers, whether they're B2B, B2C, whatever. So what are your thoughts about regulatory sandboxes and what's the state of play in Spain?
Well, in Spain, it was launched 1 year ago, the regulatory sandbox. It took a couple of years. It was delayed. So everything which is related with regulation, it's always slow. So it took too much time, or more time than expected, to launch. Let's say we are still learning on making the process not that much bureaucratic. So we have the sandbox. We have started to, or in Spain, it started to have the first projects in the sandbox, in the regulatory sandbox. But there's still too much regulation in order to be able to launch a project within the sandbox framework. But I think it's a matter of learning how to make it more, let's say, more efficient in terms of speed, because the idea of a sandbox was to let innovation to speed up, not to be stopped by regulation. At the same time, there are other countries. Italy has also launched a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox. I think Austria has also a regulatory sandbox. In Latin America, for example, Colombia has launched also the sandbox and is booming the fintechs in that country. And I don't know exactly, Mexico and Brazil, they are also working on regulatory sandbox. I'm not sure if Mexico already has it working, but for sure it's going to be in their plan. So I think more or less countries are promoting that sandboxes.
Absolutely, and picking up on the concept as being conducive to fostering innovation in financial services in a safe environment. Paco, you wanted to add something along those lines?
Yes, following the intervention of the interesting intervention of Vladimir, I want to point out that in relationship with the sandboxes, we need to, in Europe, we have an strong regulation called GDPR, and the GDPR is the main column around you must to build every kind of solutions relating to any kind of question. Okay, Jesus says no, I say yes, because we are working on several projects on this question. And the GDPR, if you are going to work in digital identities, decentralized identities in the IDs, you need to take account of GDPR. And the sandbox is an opportunity in order to experiment how you are going to work with it. But there is a constriction in relation with China or other countries with a more relaxed regulation about this question. So how to fix all these kind of regulation with global solutions is one of the main challenges that we have in the new area of this kind of new payments with this kind of technologies. I don't know why Jesus is against about this idea, but I'm very interested to hear.
No, I'm not against Paco. Well, let me say when since 2017 that when I begin to speak about these things in the competition university and things like that, and after speak and work with a lot of lawyers and things like that, the way we have to build right now and almost in Europe. Any kind of real blockchain project and DLT projects, and following what I said in the beginning, is trying to find not a legal way. So that path in the middle, where nothing is illegal and nothing is legal. So I agree with you with the GDPR for sure and everything like that. But when any kind of enterprises, because I have a little consultancy or focus on blockchain and DLT. When I have to try to mess with this kind of projects or whatever, what they have to find in the end here in Europe is a different way to attack that project and not exactly to go in the more legal way. And that is the way we are right now, because the regulation in Europe is this way. So, and if we are speaking about UK or perhaps South America or North America, is quite easy, Delaware or whatever. But here in Europe, we have to work in this way, yes or yes. And to go in the regulated way, and Vladimir can say that, is very complicated, and you will waste a lot of money and you waste a lot of time. And in the end, probably startups or middle enterprises that want to throw any kind of blockchain projects or whatever, they easily die here in Europe. So that is the way we are right now.
Thank you so much. And it's been absolutely fascinating to share insights, but I see signals that we'll have to hand over to our presenter today. Again, thank you so much for the vivid conversations and for sharing your insights to our broader audience. I'm sure they'll appreciate. It's been absolutely lovely to be here today.
Thank you very much, all of you, for explaining us your vision. It's really interesting to see how digital payments are taking ground. I have a last question, maybe, and Laura can answer it briefly. Maybe it's a crazy question, but here I go. Do you think if this trend goes up, maybe physical money could disappear? What do you think about it?
There could be benefits to that, but it's probably not exactly around the corner. Personally, I don't use much physical money anymore, and I'm pretty sure lots of people would actually resonate with that. But I'm sure that in some parts of the world, it's not yet the case.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Vladimiro, Francisco, Jesus, and Lar, of course. We have to say goodbye, but first of all, we have to say thank you to all our partners, to the City Council, also the Ministry of Transport, the Akbar and Serbi Habitat companies, and now we leave you with an inspirational talk with Andrea Villalonga about positive activism. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you in a bit.